The shocking truth behind Chevrolet's banned 427 motor mystery. It was fast, it was powerful, and then it was gone. Chevrolet 427 motor mystery. Chevrolet's mystery motor was a glimpse into the future of racing dominance, a beastly 427 cubic inch V8 that could have rewritten the history of muscle cars. But just as it was poised to take over NASCAR, it vanished. Shut down, locked away, and buried beneath corporate bureaucracy. But why? What was the GM hiding? And how did this so-called failed engine end up shaping some of the most legendary big blocks of all time? To understand this mystery, we have to go back to the late 1950s. The birth of Chevy's big blocks. Chevrolet's W Series. V8 engines were no joke. The 348 and later the 409 were absolute monsters in their time, paving the way for the legendary Mark IV big blocks of the 60s and 70s. These were the engines that powered the golden age of muscle cars. Engines that lived in everything from full-size Chevys to dragstrip Dominators. But something was missing. Something bigger. The 1963 Z11 was a bored and stroked 409. It was only available in a handful of Chevrolet Impalas, and on paper, it produced 430 horsepower. In reality, that number was likely much higher. This was a purpose-built race engine, an outlaw lurking beneath the hood of select factory cars. But even with its raw power, the Z11 wasn't enough. Chevrolet needed something that could dominate NASCAR. And that's when they did something radical. The mysterious Mark II 427. Officially, it was known as the Mark II Phi-8. But to those in the know, it was simply called the mystery motor. Unlike the W Series engines, which had a unique combustion chamber design within the block, the Mark II was a massive leap forward. It introduced a completely new cylinder head configuration, with canted valves and a proper combustion chamber in the head itself. This meant better breathing, higher RPM potential, and most importantly, more power. But how much power? That depends on who you ask. Chevrolet never officially released numbers, but estimates put it somewhere between 500 and 600 horsepower. And it wasn't just theoretical. The mystery motor hit the track in early 1963, fitted into select NASCAR stock cars, and it was immediately clear, this thing was special. Then, just as suddenly as it arrived, it was gone. The secrets of the mystery motor. The mystery motor, a name that hides more than it reveals, but when unleashed, it packs a punch. Born from GM's W Series casting, this engine was built for the 427 mystery motor. The W Series block normally had a 74-degree machined head surface, but for the 427, GM flipped the script, changing it to a standard 90-degree angle, requiring custom cores to fit. While the MM might resemble the Z11 427 built for drag racing, its unique casting earned it its own identity, the Mark II. These engines carried the casting number 0-217199, with the 0 marking its pre-production phase and the date 9/13/62 stamped into history. A small detail, but important for those who live for legends. In a pre-Daytona dyno test, the 427 mystery motor cranked out a jaw-dropping 620 horsepower, fed by a single Holley carb on top of a high-rise 180-degree aluminum manifold. GM created 4 distinct intake manifolds, all with the same 180-degree design. Smokey Yunick, legendary in his own right, argued that casting number 0232166 was the one to beat. So, what stood out the most in the mystery motor's design? The heads. Lighter than the Mark IV big block by 25 pounds, they featured 2.19-inch intake valves and 1.72-inch exhaust valves, with combustion chambers similar to the Mark IV heads of the 60s and 70s. Often called porcupine heads by the press, GM's official term was canted valve heads. For all that power, the mystery motor's pop-up pistons pushed the compression ratio to a monstrous 12.4 to 1, even before any milling was done. With a 1.75 to 1 rocker arm ratio and round exhaust ports, this engine was made for performance. The exhaust manifolds, made of cast iron, featured 2-inch primary tubes, each stretching 33 inches long, merging into a 4-inch diameter, 26-inch long collector, perfect for NASCAR's high-speed tracks. GM also used this engine to test screw-in rocker studs, a key upgrade due to the canted valve design's habit of pulling out traditional pressed-in studs under heavy load. The 427 short block shared the same 4.84-inch bore spacing as the 348/409 engines. Its 4.31-inch bore and 3.65-inch stroke matched the 427 Z11 engine's specs. These performance pistons, part number 0-233239, pushed the compression ratio to that deadly 12.4 to 1. Rumors say GM only produced 18 of these engines, making the mystery motor a rare beast in automotive history. And the wildest part? Just a few years later, the secrets of the 427 engine were finally exposed. Let's crack the evolved Z11 engine open and see what was really hiding inside. Inside the 427 motor mystery, the evolved Z11. It all began in 1961. Chevrolet called it the Z11. Some whispered about the 427 motor mystery, while others dismissed it as just an offshoot of the 348 truck engine. But none of that really matters now, because Chevrolet, always playing with fire, was about to unleash something far more menacing. They called it the ZL1. And no, this wasn't just a revamped L88. This was an all-aluminum beast, so potent, so untamed, that Chevrolet didn't even dare reveal its true power numbers. Officially, a modest claim of 430 horsepower. Reality? More like 625, pumped through a single 4-barrel carb, making it one of the most powerful factory engines ever built. And as if that wasn't enough, it was 160 pounds lighter than its iron-blocked brother, 427. Enter Chevy's Bill Polkinghorne and GM's public relations man, Walter McKenzie, who let a few insiders in on the secrets. Those lucky enough to snag a ride in a prototype Corvette equipped with a ZL1 knew immediately. This wasn't just another big block. This was the future. To understand the ZL1, you need to trace its lineage. By 1968, the L88 was already a monster, but Chevrolet wasn't satisfied. The cylinder head saw a major redesign. Ports, cross-sectional areas, flow characteristics, everything changed. The result? A 30% increase in mixture flow. An evolution that took Chevrolet's big blocks from mere muscle to something approaching forbidden science. Gone was the sharp intake port radius of the L88. The new heads featured an open combustion chamber, eerily reminiscent of Chevy's small block designs. This reshaped chamber, combined with new piston geometry, improved volumetric efficiency and increased gross horsepower. The new pistons even mimicked the high-revving 302 small block, an unusual design choice for a torque-hungry 427. Chevy had been playing with aluminum heads for years, even back in 1965. But the real secret? The cast-iron version. In 1966, Chevrolet developed a high-flow cast-iron big block head, never publicly released, but it served as the blueprint for what became the aluminum ZL1 head. And when the aluminum program finally went green, they copied the iron head almost bolt for bolt. The only real difference? A slight chamber tilt in the aluminum casting. The Mark IV big blocks were always eager to respond to exhaust flow improvements, and Chevy took that to heart. The L88's 2.19-inch intake and 1.84-inch exhaust valves had worked well enough. But for the ZL1, the exhaust grew to 1.88 inches. The breathing improvements continued with an increased lift camshaft. 0.560 inches on the intake, 0.60 on the exhaust. That might not sound like much, but when paired with the reworked heads, it transformed the ZL1 into an absolute airflow monster. Furthermore, the ZL1 wasn't just about power, but it was about technology. By 1966, aluminum cylinder cases were already in development, and by the time the ZL1 rolled out, it wasn't just lighter than the L88. It was a whole new level of engineering. The entire block was aluminum, except for pressed-in iron cylinder liners. The result? Strength, but without the weight penalty. But here's the catch. Aluminum and iron expand at different rates under heat. That meant traditional gaskets wouldn't work. So Chevrolet had to innovate. They developed a raised lip head gasket that created an O-ring-like seal, ensuring that even under extreme conditions, compression stayed where it was supposed to. In other words, inside the cylinders. Still, skeptics wondered if an all-aluminum big block could hold up under real-world abuse. Chevrolet answered with 4 brutal durability cycles. Each test simulated a different racing environment: sports car courses, road courses, drag racing, and even stop-and-go street conditions. The engine was flogged, overheated, and ran at a red line for hours. And it survived. The street killer that wasn't supposed to exist. Here's where things get interesting. The ZL1 was never meant to be a production engine. Chevrolet's brass had greenlit it for Can-Am racing, where unlimited budgets and exotic materials reigned supreme. But someone at Chevy had other ideas. Enter Vince Piggins, Chevrolet's high-performance expert. He had a trick up his sleeve, and that is COPO. The central office production order system was meant for fleet vehicles: taxis, police cars, special utility trucks. But Piggins saw an opportunity. If you knew the right codes, you could order a street-legal ZL1 Camaro, a car that was never supposed to exist. The result? 69 ZL1 Camaros built, each one a ticking time bomb of horsepower waiting to be unleashed. The price? A gut-punching $7,200, twice the cost of a standard Camaro. Dealers didn't know what to do with them. Some sat unsold for years, but those who got their hands on one knew they had something special, something Chevrolet itself tried to bury. GM killed the mystery motor. At the peak of its development, GM pulled the plug, not just on the mystery motor, but on all of its factory-backed racing programs. In 1963, General Motors issued an internal ban on racing, officially withdrawing all support from motorsports. This wasn't just a strategic decision, it was a corporate mandate. The reasoning? Public image and looming antitrust concerns. The government had its eye on GM's overwhelming market control, and the company feared that its dominance in motorsports would only fuel further scrutiny. So, the mystery motor never got its chance to shine. The cars that had been equipped with it were left to fend for themselves without factory backing. Some, like Junior Johnson's Chevrolet, still managed to find success. But without continued development, the Mark II faded into obscurity. Or did it? The resurrection. While the mystery motor itself was gone, its DNA lived on. Chevrolet's engineers didn't just throw their work away. In fact, the innovations they had introduced in the Mark II were already being adapted into something even greater: the Mark IV Big Block. This was the engine that would truly define Chevrolet's muscle car era. The Mark IV debuted in 1965 as a 396 cubic inch V8. It retained the canted valve design of the mystery motor and introduced even more refinements. By 1966, the 427 was back, but this time in production cars. The new 427 Big Block was available in Corvettes, full-size Chevys, and as a racing-oriented option in the form of the legendary L88 and ZL1 variants. This engine didn't just pick up where the mystery motor left off, but it surpassed it. The L88 427 made a conservative 430 horsepower, but real-world numbers were closer to 550. In other words, these engines became legends, powering everything from factory muscle cars to top-tier drag racers. What could have been? The biggest what-if in this story? If GM hadn't pulled the plug on racing, the mystery motor might have continued its evolution directly on the track, rather than being quietly refined behind closed doors. NASCAR could have been dominated by Chevrolet years earlier, and the muscle car wars of the late 60s might have played out very differently. Instead, we got a different path, one where the lessons of the mystery motor were folded into a new generation of engines that would go on to define an entire era of American performance. Also, the Mark IV 427 may have only existed for 4 years, 1966 to 1969, but its impact was massive. It became the ultimate expression of Chevrolet's big block power, laying the foundation for the monstrous 454 that followed in 1970. Even after the 427 disappeared from factory production cars, it lived on in drag racing, street machines, and countless hot rods. And the mystery motor? It never got the chance to be the dominant force in NASCAR that it was meant to be, but its influence is undeniable. It was the missing link between the old W-Series big blocks and the legendary Mark IVs, a secret project that only a handful of insiders knew about, until now. Although banned, the Chevrolet 427 motor mystery evolved. Drop your thoughts below. And if you're a true Chevy fanatic, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more in-depth stories on legendary engines.